So, hello everybody. Wanted to talk about the drone issue that's going on right now. Of course, the big news is over on the East Coast. There's like swarms of drones over there, but it's really a problem across the whole United States and other countries as well. It's really a worldwide phenomenon right now.
So I know this stuff is real. I know the aliens are real.
This thing that's happening is You know, the word drones is being used like swamp gas right now. It's trying to explain something in the sky that isn't easily explainable. And I know that there are drones in the skies that people are taking pictures of and stuff, but there's also something else going on because some of these lights are moving in ways that drones don't move, and they're not giving out a heat signature. And our anti-drone weapons are taking down the drones, but not these things.
For months now, there have been mystery objects hovering over US airspace, including over sensitive US military facilities, and increasing.
And so the the problem is a lot more complex than uh, a bunch of kids flying their drones around at night, or Walmart making deliveries at night, or any of these things that don't make any sense that are kind of being floated out there. And there's all kinds of other explanations that it's a secret government operation to sniff out a nuclear warhead or something like that. There's plenty and plenty of stories going around, but none of those stories going around really account for these objects that really don't make any sense, that can't be drones.
It's not just happening in the US, it's happening in almost every country in the world.
And to understand this problem is we have to start with what matter is. What is matter and mass? Because if we can understand that in the way that the quantum physicists uh, of early day, like 120 years ago, were trying to put it out there, that consciousness is fundamental. It's not that something that comes out of your brain. It's something that is there, and our brains are able to pick up on it, and we use it.
The actual material manifestation of the universe actually takes place out of an infinite and eternal field of consciousness.
Something like that. And we've we've tried really hard to hold on to this physical only world where nothing else exists except for physical things. And it's not working.
Really found computer code.
You dig deeper, you find computer code writ in the fabric of the cosmos.
And our science is up against a brick wall in that area. Like Chalmers is saying, it's the hard question of science. And the reason is that we, for all these years that people have tried to figure out what consciousness is, they haven't come up with anything other than it must come out of the brain. But there's really no evidence for that other than that it's correlated to your brain. In other words, if you have a brain injury, it affects it. But that really doesn't say anything more than it answers both propositions equally. if it's being received in your brain and you break part of the receiver, well, it's going to affect it. And if it's being produced by the brain and you break part of your brain, well, it's going to affect it too. So those correlations don't add up to anything. So when we look at quantum physics, especially the way the people that discovered it put it,
phenomenon. It's a consciousness
Bigger than language.
that abides. That's right.
it puts consciousness as fundamental. And if we start there, things become a whole lot easier to understand.
Which it didn't feel right. We're doing something that is so mind-blowing that this is like something everyone should know about. I mean, it's really schizophrenic in the sense that you go into the building, into your office at SRI, and you're studying how mind is expansive throughout space and time in the universe. And we were working with very talented people who were demonstrating that on a daily basis. And then you go outside of the building and you either completely denied it or you just didn't talk about it at all. And you're very well aware of what people were thinking about these things. And so that I imagine it would be similar today for people who may know more about UFOs or UAPs than they're able to talk about. I mean, if there truly are ETs among us, well, I would like to know that. Like, have a TV show and let's have an interview or something.
Okay, so if we take color, for example, the qualia of color is something that happens in your brain. When you perceive color, that is a wave of information coming into your eyes, and that information is manipulated a little bit and sent to your brain, and your brain paints a picture. Now, nobody would dispute that in science. What gets disputed is that it's recreating it or creating it. That's the issue. Whether or not the color actually exists, or it is only the information that exists, and your brain creates the perception of it all. And I think that's the issue, that if you get beyond that, where you understand that your brain is creating the world you see, things become much easier to understand, at least in the world of strangeness, like the UFO stuff, and even ESP, and all of the strange things that happen that we have no explanation for, and we just kind of ignore them because we have no explanation for them, so they can't exist. And the reason why they can't exist is because we're stuck in this physical only worldview. And if we can grow out of that, we'll be able to answer a lot of stuff. I think Tesla was trying to say this so many years ago, and nobody got it. Or if they did get it, they were just trying to prove it wrong. But when those guys in 2022 won the Nobel Prize for the quantum entanglement, that was like the very last straw to physicalism, where it really is, we really have eliminated all possibilities of a physical world being the only thing out there. So when people come to that realization, it can be shocking, for sure. It is shocking, but it answers all the questions, or it gives you a way to answer them. I'm not going to say that all the things that I think I've got an answer to now are actually the correct ones, but it gives you a way to get to them. So, back to the the drones in the sky are, as a lot of people are seeing them as the orbs in the sky. Taking on this other way of thinking, we can see that there are many possibilities if consciousness is not in your brain, and if you take the UFO subject seriously, one thing that you'll notice is that consciousness is fundamental to the UFO phenomena, because you have sightings that it's not rare for someone to take a picture of something, and when they look at the picture, it's not what they saw. There's something there, but it's not the way they saw it. So there's some kind of like deception there in the vision part, and then you have lots and lots of people that they claim to have been abducted, and that's easy to write off as they're all crazy. But back when John Mack was studying these guys, and he was a Pulitzer Prize winning writer, and a well-respected psychiatrist at Stanford. And when he studied these people, he became absolutely convinced that something was happening, that these people, they didn't have any kind of narcosis or psychosis, I should say. These were otherwise healthy, mentally healthy people that are having these really extraordinary experiences. So he took them seriously, and I've noticed that with people that study UFOs. If they come into the subject as trying to disprove it, and they really do an honest investigation, they come away changing their mind. I don't know of any stories where it's happened the other way around, where a believer of this thing happening studied it real close and then came away with, oh no, it's just bull. It may have happened, but I'm not aware of it. But I am aware of plenty of people that have done it the other way around. They didn't believe it, and then when they studied it, they became believers. One other thing I've noticed, it's kind of a large issue with the UFO thing, is that a large part of the scientists that take it seriously, they take it seriously because they had events happen to them personally. And a lot of them, it's happened early in life, and maybe has happened all through their life. And they became interested trying to figure out what this is, and trying to figure out, you know, if they're going nuts or if there's really something out there. So I'm pretty well convinced that it's a real phenomena. In fact, you know, the government has said it's a real phenomena. They said that UAPs are real. They don't.
You believe that extraterrestrial intelligence has visited planet Earth?
I think you can go a step further. It hasn't just visited, it's been here a long time, and it's still here.
And that statement seems so incredible that it's tough to believe. If you had to assign a probability to that statement, that you believe extraterrestrial intelligence has visited this planet, what probability would you assign?
100%.
I don't know what they are, but whatever they are, they're real. And, you know, you get all these mixed messages from the government, so they're just not a trustworthy source of information. But there are a lot of really good people that that have. Let me just say it this way: there's a lot of good scientists and everyday people that have looked at this and are completely convinced that it's real.
Are we alone? Well, the answer is we're not alone. And I know that with 100% certainty, which as an intel officer, you never say 100%, but I talk to the highest of the high people you could possibly talk to catch my drift.
And you have people like Colonel Nail, he's gone on record, you know, and put his reputation at line, and he says that not only are the UFOs real, but non-human intelligence are real, and it's here.
Questions?
3 on how the Army could be more effective. And my last assignment was involved with the UAP task force, which maybe is the most apropos for this discussion.
And so, Carl, here's the $1 million question. Do you believe that a higher form of non-human intelligence has visited this planet?
Right. So non-human intelligence exists. Non-human intelligence has been interacting with humanity. This interaction is not new, and it's been ongoing. And there are unelected people in the government that are aware of that.
And so, Carl, that is quite a bold statement. I'm wondering, and I'm curious, how confident are you that that is true?
There's zero doubt.
Lou Elizondo has said the same thing. It's 100%. Dave Grush has said it's 100%. In fact, you know, all these people that that have really strong reputations, they all agree that there's just no doubt that this is happening. So that's what I think is happening with the drones all around the world. It doesn't make sense that it's anything else, you know, because even if it was China, I could see a nation state being able to afford all these drones for an area like New Jersey, but all around the world, all at the same time, I don't think so. You know, these things, a lot of them are being described as, you know, the size of SUVs and stuff, and that's not a cheap machine. If it's a real drone, you know, you're talking hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars for each one. Then you got, you know, many, you know, there's like hundreds of reports, you know, coming off the East Coast in daily events, or almost daily maybe. So you got thousands and thousands of them across the world. So there's a whole lot of reasons why I don't think it's drones. I think that people are sending drones up to try to see what it is. And, you know, airplanes fly across the sky while people are trying to figure out what it is. And, you know, there's a lot of stuff in the sky. When you're looking for something weird, you start seeing a lot of different things because you're paying attention. But it's my position that this is a UAP, UFO, and it's linked to consciousness. And that's why it's hard to study, is because you're studying something that knows what you're thinking. It's been spoke about many times that this link to consciousness is, like both ways. It's like they know what you're thinking, so it makes it really hard to study them if they don't want to be studied. Now, for them to be out in the numbers that they are right now, I think they want to be studied. They're trying to make a statement, perhaps.
That's a science. There's a science to this, of learning how to meditate and how to do all these kind of things to kind of increase your spiritual sensitivity. And this is a science. It's not hocus pocus. It's not all mysteria tremendum. The Jesuits approach this in a very, very practical, realistic kind of scientific way. That one of the major heresies of all religious understandings is to try to nounify what they call God. They've developed this word for it.
Yeah.
It's a noun, and they talk about it like it's a person that you're talking to, like a great white bearded guy sitting on a throne somewhere, right? To nounify this is a heresy. That's why you're never allowed to pronounce the name, right? It's a heresy to announce the name.
To say God?
Yes. Because
having studied this for over 25 years, I am absolutely convinced, based on evidence, that you, me, every single person seeing this video, yes, all of us, are indeed going to have life after death. We are literally eternal beings having a physical earthly life. This is temporary.
Amazing, because it was just very strange.
She said it examined her?
Well, it
looked at her?
Okay. So you have to understand translation from that time period.
Okay.
So let's be super clear.
Okay.
So when I say, I'm using the word examined, but probably I should not have used that word. It basically said it took this dart and it thrust it into her entrails. Those are the words that she used. So, it was something that I didn't expect to see. Mm-hmm. So this would be the example, but there were many more examples that weren't as famous. That's the most famous example, the one that Catholics would know about. But there were a lot of examples that I had that no one would know about because they're not digitized and they're in old manuscripts. It was a coincidence, but there was a conference in my town for people who were experiencers, UFO experiencers. So I went to that and I heard them talk about their experiences, and I saw that these experiences that they were having were like an exact match with the experiences that I had cataloged from hundreds of years ago up till the present. And I recognized that this was a continual pattern, and it kind of blew my mind. At the time, I was like, wow. So I did a little more exploring, and I started to look at primary source material from Catholic experiences, like from saints like Teresa of Avila, Saint Francis of Assisi. And when I started to read the primary source material, I saw that it was also very similar to what you would see in John Mack's book, because at this point I read John Mack's book, Abduction. And it literally, these experiences of the saints could be other chapters in his book. And so at the time, I knew Jeff Kripal, but he's a professor at Rice University who looks into this type of thing. And I told him, I said, have you seen this? And he at first said, no, Diana, no, I don't think so. And then I took some of the stuff that I had translated and sent it to him and said, they're talking about little beings and aerial phenomena and, other things that happened in John Mack's book. And he was blown away too. And that was the beginning of my writing about UFOs and looking at tree. They basically created the calculations to get us into space, to get us out into space. And one of these people is Jack Parsons, probably the most effective. Wernher von Braun is one as well. But he actually gave a lot of credit to Parsons and said Parsons figured all of this out. And how did Parsons figure this out? Well, he had a really interesting way. He lived in the early 20th century, and he was working on rocket technology, but he also was a friend of L. Ron Hubbard, who started Scientology, and Aleister Crowley. And he had this crazy life, and he lived in Los Angeles, and he would do rituals in the desert. And he thought that these kinds of things would help him basically download this rocket technology. And it's weird, but as weird is Konstantin Tchaikovsky on the Russian side, who didn't have the same belief system as Parsons, but believed that he was in contact with angelic presences who would also allow him to, create this rocket technology. So that's what I'm talking about, is like the religions were the traditions that held these technologies. And now I see these protocols as like body technologies or, technologies of connection. And they would enable people to be super creative and help culture in many ways. Like Teresa of Avila is a doctor of the church. She was able to do this. She was a nun. And a lot of the tradition in the Catholic tradition, the saints, they were doing the same thing. They were, they had these practices that enabled them, they believed, to connect to their God. But that's just because we didn't have a global society. Now we have a global society, and we can actually do analysis of what's going on when people are connecting. Harvard's done studies of people who meditate and how it changes physiologically changes your brain structure, right? Wow. Yeah.
The stories of their culture, they share the cultural memory. And I found there were very surprising overlaps and correlations from ancient culture to ancient culture. And an invasion narrative is one of the overlaps. So in the Bible, you can go to Deuteronomy 32 or Psalm 82, and you've got this explanation that these Elohim have arrived. Powerful ones is what Elohim literally means. It gets translated as God in the singular, but the word fundamentally is a plural, a masculine plural, and it means the powerful ones. They're described collectively in the Bible as the Tseva Hashemayim, the sky armies. So that's how their arrival is remembered, as the sky armies. And then in Psalm 82, Deuteronomy 32, we have an explanation of El Elyon, that's the powerful one, more senior than the other powerful ones, higher than the other powerful ones, partitioning lands out to the members of the Tseva Hashemayim, or the El Ba'adat, the Council of Powers, so that this portion of land goes to this Elohim, this portion of land goes to this Elohim. And among those Elohim is a character called Yahweh, who is a junior Elohim who gets given a people group with no land. And so there's an engineered scarcity built into the story that then means Yahweh has to go to war with the other Elohim in order to get land and resources. So that's how it works. Simply by analyzing the local lore, the folklore of the Celtic people in Scotland, came to the same conclusion. And he said, you will never have a complete understanding of why the world works in the way it does until you realize that there are elites who dictate to our visible governments, and there's an ET elite that is in conversation with our human elites. And he said, you won't understand why there are these very long-lasting uber policies that transcend the comings and goings of kings and queens and elected governments that seem to follow policies that have no sense of compassion or fellow feeling towards ordinary human beings. And he says the reason that happens is because the architects of those policies are not human.
I'm the former Minister of National Defense for Canada. And I'm not making a lecture today. What I have decided to do is just to tell you a story. It is a true story. It is stranger, I think, than science fiction. But it's not science fiction. It's the truth. So right after the war, there were some Nazi scientists that were sort of up for grabs, if I may use a colloquial speak. And they were sort of shared ultimately between the United Kingdom, the United States, and the Soviets. And the Office for Strategic Studies in the US had a list that they wanted. So they went out to find these people that they would like to have. President Truman approved this program, but he said, was a caveat. Don't take anybody who was very prominently involved or solidly involved in the Nazi Party. Well, as a former Minister of Defense and someone who understands how these things work, I can tell you that sometimes people don't pay any attention to their orders, and there was no attention paid here, and there were a lot of former Nazi scientists and engineers who were brought into the United States who had been very, very closely involved in the Nazi Party itself. And they were given new names, and they were given new CVs. And then they were appointed to important posts, both military and civil. They were in the United States. And this was called Operation Paperclip. The Nazis hadn't really given up. They had moved a lot of the scientists who were missing, the top scientists who were missing, and a lot of the U-boats, the most recent and up-to-date submarines, to Antarctica. And this was considered unacceptable. So James Forrestal, the Defense Secretary, decided to send an armada to take the post and put it out of operation. It was under the command of the intrepid Northern explorer, Admiral Richard Byrd, and he was the man in charge, and so he searched out the Nazis to find where they were hidden in the cavernous places in Antarctica, and he finally engaged them. Lo and behold, a couple of saucers appeared and sunk one of his ships and killed some of his men. Now, there's some controversy about the saucers. The way I've always heard the story was that they came out of the ocean. But I've read other reports which suggested that they might have been land-based. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. The casualties were unacceptable, and Byrd had to admit that he wasn't going to fulfill his mission. So he aborted the mission and went home months early. And he was, if I could find an appropriate word, furious, really furious. And he wanted to nuke them. So he took this to his bosses when he got back to the United States. But by then, the Nazis from Operation Paperclip, plus some Native American Nazis, because there are some that have been faithful or interested in the Nazi cause even during the war, had taken power. And they said no. So they just paraded him. They may have promoted him one rank, I'm not sure. But the decision was made not to take on the Nazi base, which was really sort of a government in waiting sort of an alternate government that had been established during the war. And I had always thought it was only begun a couple of years before the end of the war when the Nazis knew they were going to lose. But actually, I find out it was started in 1939. And
then as I became a Christian at the age of 17 and then went into ministry when I was 20 and then went into theological education a little later on, I did start finding evidences that there were other kinds of entity being recalled in the ancient texts of the Bible. And again, this sort of sat in the back of my mind for a long while. And I think a catalyst for me was 2009 when the Roman Catholic Church had what it called a colloquium. Pope Benedict XVI called on the Pontifical Academy of Sciences to have a symposium of top theologians and scholars and researchers to discuss, and they told us what they were discussing. They gave a long, it was about a year's notice that this was going to happen. They'd be discussing the theological implications of contact with other species, ET species, they meant. And prior to and in the aftermath of that symposium, some very authoritative voices for the curious stepped forward and said, we should expect contact with alien brothers and sisters sooner than anyone expects. We shouldn't be surprised to meet them because they're in the Bible. They're in the Old Testament and the New Testament. That happened in 2009, and that was a period of convalescence to do some deeper study. And I wanted to go back and look at that because I'd seen enough in my biblical studies to know there may be a few ETs washing around in the text. But when I did the study, I was blown away by how much ET contact is in those ancient stories from start to finish, and most especially when you address these translation issues and look at more fundamental readings.
Either as hemorrhagic and vascular disruptors or as actual neural network disruptors because they interfere with the network properties of various neural nodes and systems within the brain. Then I get to the area of devices. And this, in many ways, is going to be less than definitive. The reason for this is highly evolving and I think is limited only in certain cases by context of imagination. What are the devices? Well, I have them here for you here. You have neurosensory mobilizing agents, and to some extent, some of these have already been used. Things like high-output sensory stimulators that can be administered from unmanned vehicles, drones, insect-borne, or larger-scale macro.
AP is, it will be, you know, he's not saying it, I'm not putting words in his mouth, like read him as he stands, but he would describe it, if we have this experience of them, it will be either with their technology or they will be technology, okay? And so people like Simone and Tyler believe already that we are technology. They think we are biotechnology. I know it's kind of weird for people to think that way, but this is a lot of that community thinks that way.
That's fantastic.